right, so I saw Furiosa last night. Let's talk about it. Let's get all the boring stuff out of the way. So this is part of a franchise. The Mad Max franchise started in 1979. This is the 5th film. So the 1979 film, directed by George Miller, starred Mel Gibson. Then you had a movie in 81, 85. Then 30-year jump, we get Mad Max Fury Road in 2015. And then 9 years later, we have Furiosa. What I found interesting, random, but all 5 films were directed by George Miller. The 3rd film, he did have a co-director, but all 5 films in this franchise since 1979 have been directed by him, which you don't see too often, especially when you have a franchise that long. Usually you get the initial director, the creator of the character, the world, what have you, who directs maybe the first, maybe 2, and then they dip out, and then you have other creatives come in and try to expand on the lore of said franchise. But you have a couple, 1 or 2, that stick to it from the beginning. James Wan, who directed, I believe, the first 2 Conjuring movies, including the first Insidious. He's been a participant in the entire franchise, but he hasn't directed all of them. Wes Craven directed, I think, the first 4 or 5 Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Fun fact, I've only seen the first one. I've seen the first one, the remake, and then Freddy vs. Jason. Don't let my shirt fool you. Freddy Krueger terrifies me. Now, I gave my little TikTok review and I posted that last night. I'm going to link it so you can go watch that. And that'll give you an idea as to what I thought about the movie. I'm just going to leave that there. I have nothing more to really add to that in terms of what I thought, the cinematography. I thought it was excellent, splendid. I love the movie, but there are some other things that I want to really dig into, especially conversation that I'm seeing now. I feel like there are 2 camps with this movie, people who either absolutely loved it or they were very irritated by it. And they're very irritated by it because they loved Mad Max Fury Road so much. Now, I've only seen half of Fury Road. That's on me. I've been trying to watch it at home and I can't sit still and focus long enough. Visually, it's got my brain in 50 different directions and it's very hard for me to sit still and just focus on said movie. I have to be doing something else, but I feel like with that movie, if I blink, I miss something. So yeah, what I have seen of that movie, it's very intense, it's raw, it's very masculine in the way it induces a little bit of that inner anxiety and terror, the carnage. This movie is not that. It's definitely intense, it's epic in volume, but it's missing that rage. This movie is much calmer, and I think there's a reason for that, and I really want to talk about it. I think the reason why, at least the reason why I think so, I think it's fascinating. So let's dig into that part. Now, to rewind it back a little bit, just talking about the overall view that Hollywood seems to have of women, because that's what this ultimately is about. It's about the female protagonist. Hollywood, I feel like, has just been at a loss in terms of what to do with women in lead roles. They seem to have lost sight of what a woman is in terms of how we're different from men, and that they're almost stripping women of their femininity and trying to make them more masculine. I don't know why they think this is appealing to people, but in real life, people don't like those kind of women. Even women who are like those women don't like those kind of women. We don't want to see them on screen. We don't want to see women who are stripped of their femininity. We don't want to see women stripped of the things that make them different from men in terms of our personality, the way we approach things, our empathy. We're very different, and these differences are beautiful, and Hollywood just doesn't seem to see that. We're seeing this with, the Marvels, where they seem to just strip the femininity out of everything. Or you take a movie like The Invitation, which I've talked about before, not an action movie, but it is a romantic horror film, gothic horror film. And you have this female protagonist whom we're supposed to be rooting for, because this is all about smashing the patriarchy and female autonomy, but she was just insufferable. We did not like her. And Hollywood just can't seem to get it right. But I feel like George Miller, he got it. And because we're so not used to seeing it anymore, I think that's why people are just like, what is this? Now, if you are someone, you watch this and the tone just is like, if something's off, I don't know if I like it, you're valid, 1000%. I'm not here to argue with you and say you're totally wrong for feeling that way. Like, how could you do that? But I think this is a nice little experiment in getting back to the way things were when we had these female action protagonists who were strong, who were mighty, who kicked ass. but they were feminine. They were women. They were beautiful. There was a beauty in their strength that has been stripped from them for so many years. And George Miller, I think, brought that back. And he not only gave us this female protagonist who is strong and mighty and vengeful, and she's got emotions, but she's feminine and she's beautiful, but he also set the tone of the film to match her. Stay with me. Anya Taylor-Joy, who plays Furiosa, she's just regal. She's stunning. She's beautiful. She stands out. She has a face that you can't really ignore. I've said this before, but she has what I call a canvas face, in that you can do whatever you want with her. You can make her into whatever you want her to be. But you can't take your eyes off of her. You're drawn, you're sucked in. And that's very much her in this movie, because her character doesn't speak a whole lot, but she says a lot with her face. And they give her blue eyes for this movie. And there's so much emphasis on her eyes, making sure that we're locked into her eyes and we're looking into her eyes and we're seeing the emotion, the tears, the heartache, the anger, the rage within her face. And again, I think this goes into talking about a very feminine tone for this movie. The rage is still there, the anger is still there, the carnage, the blood, the guts, the gore, it's still there. This movie is rated R for a reason, but this doesn't move quite as heavy as the previous films. This has a very smooth way of going about it, almost manipulative, that just speaks to, we're being led by a woman. That's not always easy for a man to do, to step outside of his male shoes and into a woman's shoes and think like a woman and move like a woman and anticipate each move the way a woman would. Not to say that, oh, men can't do it, but you're a man and you've been a man your whole life. I don't expect you to get it. So when you do, I think it's fascinating to see all of that from your perspective, because for us as women, I think it's very ordinary, but when men do it, you can kind of see in their eyes how they find it to be beautiful and sexy. So we have this very calm tone, this woman who's kind of leading the way, leading the charge. We're following her, we trust her, and there's so much chaos going on around us, so much bloodshed, and yet she offers a sense of safety and security that makes us want to follow her. I think that's what it is. I think that's the difference that people are noticing. This has a very feminine touch to it. Our protagonist is a woman. We're being led by a woman, and she's not leading like a man. For me, that's just refreshing. It's nice to see that there are directors and writers in Hollywood who get it. Women don't have to be men. We don't have to be. In the middle of all of this, there is a theme in here centered around female autonomy. And I'm seeing kind of an uptick in movies that center on female autonomy. I think if you pay attention to culture and what's going on in society, you can see a bit of that being mirrored in film. It's almost like it's our way of trying to process and make sense of it all. And as Hollywood tries to make sense of it, they start, if they're doing it properly, they start to read the room a little bit and figure out how we're feeling about everything. And it's this interesting form of communication. But I'm seeing quite a few movies that really are talking about female autonomy. Now, I'm not just talking about pro-choice or pro-life here. I feel like that's very simple. But just the ability to make our own choices and the ability to build our own lives and define ourselves however we choose. So I think about the movie, it was like The Royal Hotel from last October or November. And that was really centered on female autonomy and women being able to make choices for themselves. You had The First Omen, which was all about the female body and women deciding what options they have in terms of making these kinds of choices. It was all about about women's options being taken from them. That was kind of what The First Omen was all about. And then you have this movie about a young girl who's stolen from her home, who is forced to live with this crazy Chris Hemsworth, and then she is given to this other man who is like, I'm gonna make you one of my brides, and forces her to live with the other little concubines. And then this man tries to do things to her while she's still a child, mind you. She's not having that. So she really has to In order to save her own life, she has to strip herself of her own identity, which is very much in line with what's happening in real life. But it's almost relatable in that sometimes in real life, in order to save ourselves, us being women, we have to strip ourselves of what makes us identifiable as women. In her case, she cuts her hair and damn near shaves it and tries to pass herself off as a boy just to save her own life, just to not be a victim of something heinous. And it's sad. And even in the midst of all of these struggles of not being where she wants to be, of being forced to be in this place and that place, under this man with that man, she manages to build an identity of her own. She manages to define herself however she chooses, all while seeking justice for herself and for her own mother. And those are basically my thoughts about Furiosa. If you have seen it already, or if you're going to see it, and when you do see it, if you had issues with the tone or the pacing, tell me. I want to hear your thoughts, especially if you're a man. I would love to know if there's kind of a difference there. I think there might be. We view things differently, and when it comes to entertainment, what entertains us, what holds our attention is also very different. I'm always fascinated by the differences. So if you were someone, the tone or the pacing, you weren't so sure, why isn't this like Fury Road? Tell me about it. I would love to hear from you. But in the meantime, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for listening. I love you very much. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.